What do you think the theme is in these midweek losses to these in-state programs?
We need to be better, period. We need to be better. We should not lose these games, so we need to get better.
Mark Kingston after last night's 7-4 Gamecock loss at Founders Park to Presbyterian. Welcome in on your Wednesday morning. Bill Gunter is back from, you're calling it a mini vacation?
Mini vacation, yeah. A couple hours off.
How many days off do you have to get to be called a full-fledged vacation?
It's a midweek. You got to take 3 full days off,
okay.
Right? Don't you kind of have to? And I kind of wrapped in the Friday, not having to get up at bright and early. Did the Heath show on Friday afternoon from 4 to 7. But
right, you've had 3 shows off in this here early game.
So mini vacation, and we had good times, man. Good times. A lot of great hockey. I was telling you right as we were going on air. The hate texting was in full force on Monday night for the Lightning and the Devils there, and I've got more of that tonight. But yeah, again, it was once again proof that me being on my own is not such the best thing. I got a sunburn that was more in the nature of pink than red because I got really excited to be out on the lake on Saturday. Also, may have gotten very excited about some Bloody Marys I made. Pretty good too. Added bacon in there.
Pink is better than red, though, right?
I don't know, not in the sunburn, man. I was
really?
On the flip side of because the wind was blowing and it was a rough. It's been a rough go of it, but I enjoyed.
What a soldier!
Fought through it. Did a little shopping. Got some summer clothes, and that was a good time.
My manly co-host is back here, sunburned and shopping, a mini vacation.
It was a good couple days off. We had a soccer game. Austin scored 3 goals in we had 6 total. He scored 3, highlighted by quite a celebration. The flying airplane around the field, where the kid puts his arms out and is running around the field. There was also, we gave up a goal, and he might have been on his knees slapping the ground feverishly.
So the drama comes from whom?
Well, we've already heard "we" in this conversation.
It's true.
He's already put himself in there.
There was also a move he did not get from me, where a much taller kid, Austin, put his life at risk by just diving in front of him to stop a potential goal.
Oh, love for the game. You haven't sucked that out of him yet. That's good. So good for him.
So we had that going. So it was a whole weekend, and this weekend he's got a birthday weekend, so it'd be big.
On this program, you missed a lot of Gamecock basketball talk, actually. Big commitment over the weekend, I guess. Yeah. Point guard out of Memphis, TJ Moss. And then yesterday is when we talked about it for the first time. I guess Monday, a little bit afternoon, David Beatty, the news coming out that he would not return to the Gamecock program, making it 4 transfers this year. It's the second straight year 6 players have exited the program. So that's 12 combined in the last 2 years. It's a pretty significant number and has been a bit of a hot topic. Obviously, today, the Gamecock baseball program, I think, going to be a hot topic because you just put it out on Twitter. I think you mentioned what we talked about on Friday. Just you weren't in on Friday morning, but the tone from Friday morning, just 3-4 days ago, after a big 3-2 win against Arkansas at number 3 in the country, and now fast forward several days where you got a 3-game losing streak, and now you've only scored 4 runs in these last 3 games. You combine that with just the 3 runs scored in that series opener against Arkansas. You scored 7 runs in 4 games. It's been very disappointing, and I think I'm guessing Carolina baseball fans hope that this is the basement. This is as the low point. Last night, Presbyterian comes in one of the worst RPIs in the country at 275. There are only 297 Division I baseball teams. They'd won 12 games and lost a lot more than that. They came in with a 12-26 record, and the Gamecocks get down early. They come back, tie the game up at 3. I thought they would go on from there and pull away, and the exact opposite happens. Presbyterian pulls away and wins at 7-4 last night, out hitting the Gamecocks 9-6. The midweek struggles continue, and I think that's the most glaring issue right now. In-state, smaller schools losses. You add Presbyterian to a growing list of almost every school in the state of South Carolina. You got Furman on there. You got Charleston Southern. You got the Citadel this year. All losses. David Cloninger putting out the tweet, since 1947, this hasn't happened in the same season. Charleston Southern not included in that list because they didn't play baseball back then. But the depth right now kind of epic proportions. The Gamecocks dropped to 20-17 on the season.
Yeah, and you hear that opening clip that we played from Mark Kingston, and I get the impression that he doesn't know what to do right now, that this is uncharted territory for him, that, I don't know. To get him in a private moment would be kind of interesting to hear what he's got to say, because most coaches, at least when they're considering taking a job, they kind of look over the roster. Maybe they don't watch 8-10 games, but they kind of do just a little bit of
scouting
research on what they're taking over and go, okay. And, we heard Mark Kingston say that going into year one, that, hey, this team not much better talent-wise than the South Florida team we just left. And I think most people, myself included, would look at the recruiting classes that Chad Holbrook brought in, the rankings of them, and would kind of scoff at that notion and say, well, these are, look, I get it, but these are still some pretty we're talking top 10 classes here. We're not talking classes between 40 and 60. We're talking top 10 classes.
I actually didn't take that as a shot at all. I took that as a pretty solid dose of reality and not raising expectations rolling into a season, because South Florida sits right now with an RPI of 26th in the country. They're 24-13 this year. They got to a regional last year and darn near knocked off Florida in Gainesville.
But I think the point being is, you look at what has transpired with this baseball team, and somebody hit me up on Twitter last night and said, well, is it coaching or is it the players? And quite frankly, I don't know. I don't know if any of us know. I don't think it's easy.
How could you not say it's the players at this point with two different coaching staffs and similar results now?
Because I have a hard time believing that the recruiting rankings for this team were that far off. That now, granted, there are injuries. There are some players missing that would typically be playing, but I also have a hard time believing that these players. Now, when you say there's the players, is there more to it? Is there just not a fight to win in the dugout? I don't know, but look, I can't. I understand what you're saying about two coaching staffs, but remember this team last year. They weren't losing these games. They might have been losing the SEC games. They weren't losing the midweek games. They might have got blown out by North Carolina, but it wasn't what was happening now wasn't happening last year. And so, I'm not saying Mark Kingston's a bad coach and bad hire. That's not what I'm saying. But at some point now you start to look at this baseball program and go, okay, when does it get back, or will it get back, or how can it get back to being one of the premier programs in the country? Because it's no longer that.
RPI for the Gamecocks going down significantly at last night after the loss, as you might imagine, down 15 spots to 73 in the country. LSU comes to town this weekend. It's a familiar narrative at this point, Bill. The Gamecocks continued to get chances to improve their seasons with SEC opponents, but what we saw last weekend continued that narrative as well, on the cusp of being able to take a big series win and not being able to figure things out.
Getting that win Friday, I put out that tweet on Friday doing Heath's show as we were kind of waiting for the game, because it was kind of astounding. You looked back on it, the 1-5 start to SEC play, being swept on the road at Georgia, and Georgia now starting to look like a very solid baseball program. But you kind of looked back and you said, all right, they start 1-5, but if they had won that night, Friday night, all of a sudden they would be 500 in league play. They'd be 7-7. And you kind of looked at it and you went, that going into that night, Adam Hill was going to be on the mound, and you're going, boy, it's a really good opportunity for South Carolina baseball, obviously.
You keep going, though. You get 2 7-inning games. You can't ask for a much better opportunity than that on a Saturday. Weather's cold. The home field advantage isn't quite what it normally is out of Baum Stadium, Fayetteville. And then you don't get a run.
Yeah, and so the ups and downs of the baseball team, because, again, it feels like, all right, things are going good. You sweep Tennessee. You're in shape to maybe make a run. You're up on North Carolina. You're tied in the 8th, and then you get beat 11-3. Okay, you come back. You have opportunities. You can't take advantage of them. It's one of those, the inconsistency of this team, and that's, I think, the other thing why I can't completely just put it all on the players, because the coaches have the players have won some games. They've beaten Florida. They've trounced Kentucky. They've beaten Arkansas on the road. It's got to be a mixture of both, and I don't have the answers. Thank goodness I'm not a baseball coach. I have zero clue as to what direction, or I also don't think it's just as simple as, well, he's got to get better players in here. I don't think that's – I know that's a lot of times the answer to certain questions when you make a coaching change. Somebody hit me up last night, and I thought about this. In what sport is system most important? Because you hear that I'll go back and find this tweet last night, and it was basically saying that it's from Brandon. This was several hours ago. Not the correct players for Kingston's system. Too early to blame the coach yet, but this is inexcusable. I don't feel like is baseball a system sport?
I don't think so.
Like, I can kind of understand football a little bit. Basketball, I can kind of grasp. So what is the one sport where your coaching style system matters the most? Because I don't think baseball is. I mean, you should be able to take players and plug them in, and what I would assume, again, has got to be just somewhat talented players. I don't think that these guys are College World Series material type players, but I also don't think that they're this.
Well, they just won at number 3 Arkansas just a few days ago.
Right.
That's how high the talent goes. And now they lose to one of the worst teams in college baseball a couple of days later at home.
Yeah.
That's the confusing part, and that's what led the way in our poll question a couple of days ago. How do you feel about the 6-9 SEC start halfway through? Confusion won out. Optimism was a pretty close second, I think, and anger was down there as well, was an option. I think when you continue to see midweek losses like you saw last night, the anger part goes up. The confusion might be less. JJ weighing in on the Shepherd's Glass inbox this morning, at Will Gunter with 1L, at Tim Hill 1075, says it's not talent, it's mindset. JJ continues with the key players are not confident or arrogant like past key players were. Weak-minded team is what JJ finishes with. We'd like to hear more from you on the Shepherd's Glass inbox or the Love Chevrolet phone lines this morning at 803-404-6100. We'll talk it out on the baseball side of things. Didn't even mention Chris Silva has officially declared his intentions for the NBA draft, has not hired an agent. We have heard this story before for Gamecock basketball. We'll try to figure out if this year's a little bit different for Chris Silva and where he may fit as far as his future goes, as far as the Gamecock basketball program. What does that mean for Frank Martin and company? We'll get into that, and got NBA playoffs to get to a little bit. I see that's got your attention here in the All South Federal Credit Union Studios.
That
as the monitors are
NHL.
up. I'll try to keep Bill's attention as we roll on. He's back, baby. He's back.
Here's the 2-1. High, deep drive, right field. He jumped all over that baby. Watch it sail. Gone! JBJ crushing one here in Anaheim.
First home run of the season for Jackie Bradley Jr., part of a big night for him, 3 for 5, a big night for Boston last night out in L.A. against the Angels. 10-1 the final score, and the Red Sox off to a blistering 14-2 start. That's good news for the former Gamecock. The current Gamecocks, a much different situation, losing 7-4 last night at home against Presbyterian. So Mark Kingston obviously not nearly as in a good mood as Jackie Bradley Jr. last night.
What do you think the theme is in these midweek losses to these in-state programs?
We need to be better, period. We need to be better. We should not lose these games, so we need to get better.
And these games, part of what we've seen this season. So losses now for the Gamecocks to in-state schools, Charleston Southern, the Citadel, Furman, and Presbyterian joining the mix last night. Presbyterian came into last night's game the first time in 9 games Carolina played at Founders Park. Their RPI was 275 out of 297 teams in Division I college baseball. The Gamecocks now drop 15 spots in the RPI when it comes to that, down in the 70s at 73. 20-17 on the season, 6-9 in SEC play. Bill, we talked about it in hour number 1. We'll continue to talk about it all day after another in-state school comes to Columbia and knocks off Carolina. David Cloninger put out the tweet yesterday. First time since 1947, losses to Furman, the Citadel, and Presbyterian all in the same season for South Carolina. Charleston Southern in that mix as well. They just didn't even play baseball back then. I think it is easy for us to understand not being one of the best teams in the SEC from the Gamecocks' perspective because the SEC is so good. It's easy to understand that. It's not acceptable, I don't think, to a lot of Gamecock fans, but it's easy to understand that. It is very difficult to understand not being one of the best baseball programs in the state of South Carolina, and unfortunately for the Gamecocks, that's just where they are right now.
I'm trying to look real quick. I haven't, but you can verify this with me. 5-6 against in-state teams this year, which that's including Clemson. That is including Clemson, who you took 1 of 3 from, but 5 and 6 against the in-state teams is really poor. I don't know. I think you don't want to rush to
this is,
to
by the
judgment.
way, not playing a couple of the better, smaller in-state schools in Coastal Carolina, which has the best, one of the best RPIs. I'm looking at it right now in front of me. I'll get you that RPI. They've having a really good season. They're at 17. That's the best RPI for a school inside the state of South Carolina. Clemson's sitting at 20. Charleston, haven't played them yet this season either. They're sitting at 42 in the RPI.
All right, so, I don't know where this program goes. And look, even if you want to say it's talent and players not in the system, South Carolina should still beat Charleston Southern and Furman and Citadel and Presbyterian, right? Like, even if we want to say, okay, it's blame Chad, it's the players. South Carolina should still win those games, right? But again, they've been good enough. I go back. This is where your poll question was on Monday. They've been good enough to come back and thump Kentucky 15-1. They've been good enough to go on the road on a SEC opening night, a Thursday night, with a freshman on the mound, no less, Logan Chapman, and beat a really good third-ranked Arkansas team. They've been good enough to pound the number 1 team in the nation, Florida. I think sometimes you oversimplify it and you say, well, it's baseball, and I don't know if that's the case now, but certainly it has been one of those seasons that Mark Kingston people will give him his pass. They'll say, okay, no problem. You're dealing with the former regime's issues, but he's going to have it corrected pretty quickly going into next year.
Yeah, I think it's a lot easier to have the year zero is what we called it in football, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Will Muschamp basically got. You say, okay, we understand the situation you got yourself in. It's your job to build yourself out of this thing. It's not going to be a one-year thing. We get that. I'm with you if that's SEC struggles only. But these in-state smaller school losses in the midweek are really mystifying, man. And it would be one thing if these other schools are having really good years.
Right.
I mean, like if it was Coastal or if it was Charleston having a really good year. The Charleston thing is a kind of a separate issue with Chad Holbrook being there. But these other Presbyterians having a bad year. There's no other way to put that.
Right.
I mean, they won 12 games going into last night. They were 12-26. The Citadel's having a bad year. They're not good for their standards. And when you lose to those teams like that, it makes you wonder what's going on, how you explain this year's team, because it is very confusing when you can thump really good teams. They've done that. Kentucky's a good team. Florida's the best team in college baseball and won the national championship last year, and they absolutely thumped Florida on a Saturday. So when you can have that team come to the park and play, how do you explain the other games? It's really difficult for me to get a handle on it and figure out. Clearly, Mark Kingston doesn't have it figured out. Clearly, Chad Holbrook didn't have it figured out as well. It's something that we haven't seen around Carolina baseball. Really, really surprising.
And again, and we'll see how it plays out. There's still plenty of baseball to go, but the reason I say that is because of I think most fans want to see just improvement, just want to see this team playing better. Maybe it doesn't show up in the win-loss column. I go back to Will Muschamp's first year, and at least towards the end, you saw improvement. You made the move to Jake Bentley, and you did end up seeing improvement.
Oh, market improvement, right?
And maybe it didn't resonate in the Clemson game up in Death Valley, but throughout the season from game 1 to game 12, you had seen improvement. And at 6-6 when it was finished, nobody was jumping up and down that it was 6-6. Nobody was ready to throw a parade, but people were saying, okay, it's an improved football team. And if we make those same strides, we'll be happy. Well, lo and behold, they made the strides, and they won 9 games last year, and now there's going to be excitement and anticipation going into year 3 and maybe even some unrealistic expectations. I think that's the one thing that this team has got to show going forward, because there's been some mental errors, some simple mental errors. There's been some just inability to throw strikes, giving up walks at inopportune times, the ability to not get runs across at times, or just get guys on base. I think, what was it? They got one guy to third base over the last 14 innings against Arkansas, I believe. Right. I think you put that tweet out.
But that's Arkansas. And I can understand that. The problem is none of those explanations fit what we saw last night. Right?
Well,
there were no errors. Presbyterian out-hit the Gamecocks 9-6. It was 7-4. The walks weren't high on the mound. They only walked 3 guys, I think, maybe 4. And the strikeouts weren't there on the offensive side of things either. They only struck out 2 times. There's any kind of explanation I try to fit this in, I don't have one for you.
Right.
And I don't think we heard one from Mark Kingston afterwards, except that shouldn't lose these games.
Right.
And so there are no excuses being made, but there's also really no good explanation other than, I think we heard this the other night from Mark Kingston, that consistency just isn't there. Consistently, you don't get a good team coming to the park game in and game out. And that's really hard to understand from a Carolina baseball perspective, because the program had been one of, if not the best, for 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And now you're just not seeing that. It's certainly what Carolina baseball followers hope is the basement right now, losing to Presbyterian, being at 20-17. I'll point you towards Arkansas, though, a program who is clearly at the top of college baseball right now, or right amongst them, and right atop of the SEC. Just 2 years ago, they finished under 500 on the season. So Chad Holbrook finished 10 games above 500 last year, and we saw that wasn't good enough for him to continue on as the Carolina baseball coach. Big boy programs do go through struggles. Miami's struggling this year. Virginia's struggling this year. They are there. It's not a given that you're just going to continue to reign at the top of the college baseball world unless you're Mike Martin in Florida State and you win 40 games. He's going into his 38th or 39th season, I think, and has done it every single year. But he's a guy who's never won a national championship. Right. So these things, the baseball gods, Ray Tanner always used to say, figure out a way to even things out.
But I don't, because this is a sore subject with Gamecock fans, but I don't want people need to still go back and understand that run that South Carolina had for really about those 18 years and almost 20. I shouldn't say. Was it 98 to 2013? About 15 years where they didn't miss the postseason under Tanner. They were constantly in contention for the SEC. Yeah, fans could complain about that 3-year stretch where they didn't go to Omaha, and people don't realize the consistency with which that baseball program and the way it was operating. Again, maybe it didn't always live up to expectation. Maybe you were eliminated in the North Carolina State Regional, or you were eliminated in the Georgia Super Regional, and yeah, there were times that you thought maybe the team was underachieving. Now you're seeing the ups and downs of college baseball, because for 15, 16 years, going back to 97, 98, you never saw that with Ray Tanner's teams. And I think that's still you could always count on that in the spring. All right, maybe they're not a national championship team this year, but they're going to put us in postseason play, and then when you get to postseason play, anything can happen. And we saw that up close and personal in those back-to-back national championship years. And now you're seeing the ups and downs of that. And certainly right now, the lack of consistency, I think, is the most confusing thing.
And yeah, the weird part is that the talent is there, I think, for the most part. I mean, you see velocities from pitchers up probably as high as they've ever been. You see guys that have plenty of power. They had 12 or 13 guys with home runs first few games into the season. It didn't take long for guys to show off they had power. But then you're not seeing the consistency. You're not seeing the averages up. You're not seeing consistent run production, clearly with 7 runs in their last 4 games.
Well, again, I'm with you. The talent is there to win these midweek games against the lesser in-state schools. And if you're a Presbyterian fan or a Furman fan or a Citadel fan, I'm sorry, but we all agree on that South Carolina, you lose one here and there, it's a fluke. South Carolina went down one of the years they won the national championship and went to Francis Marion and lost.
2012.
It's not unheard of, but it doesn't happen on a regular basis, and that's what's happening this year.
He's Bill Gunner, back from vacation, mini vacation, a couple of days off here on the early game, and plenty. Their sunburn is cleared up. That's good news.
It's just because I haven't taken my shirt off in studio. You guys just haven't. That'll be hour 3.
Thank you.
If things slow down drastically,
no, that will not be hour 3. Or you'll
be good news, man.
By yourself.
At one point in the weekend, I weighed in at 153.
That's really good news.
I mean, we're
What are you trying to get down to?
I think maybe 150. I think that appears to be the final Gunner goal here for the summer.
I didn't know men did that.
I was thinking the same thing, that men are so focused
on goals, and I have a goal. There's nothing wrong with this. See, I've come back. I'm peppy. I'm excited. I've had some good coffee lately. It's really been. It was a good breather to get away.
Watch out, people. Bill Gunter's coming back hot.
I mean, they battled, but when you give up 7 runs, that's not good enough. Bottom line, last week Harmon pitched better, and we gave up 1 run on the road. Tonight we gave up 7 runs and wasn't good enough. I don't care if it's freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. We put you on the mound, we expect the job to get done.
Carolina baseball coach Mark Kingston talking about 4 freshman pitchers going last night against Presbyterian in the 7-4 loss. Carmen Majinski got the start, went 5 innings, gives up 4 earned runs, strikes out 4, just walks 1, but not good enough. He did throw much better in his start, looked pretty good. I forget which time. I think maybe he came in and pitched pretty well over the weekend against Arkansas, actually. Might have been before that against North Carolina, threw okay as well. But Logan Chapman has been the really pleasant surprise of the freshman pitchers, worked his way into the rotation against Arkansas, and obviously went 4 solid innings in that win in the series opener last week.
Logan Chapman and I think John Gilreath. You can throw Gilreath in there. I know he struggled a little bit of late, but I think Gilreath's going to be perfectly fine as they move forward. They asked a lot of him early on in the season, and I know people hate hearing this because of the Jake Bentley story, but he should be a senior in high school, and so I think John Gilreath will be fine as they move forward with this program. Cody Morris, by and large, has been very good throughout
in his sophomore season.
Through his sophomore season. So look, there is a foundation there. But again, it's going to be flipping next year. Maybe you'll feel more confident in the pitching, but you're going to lose basically most of your fielding positions. And so I don't know if next year is going to necessarily be that much better for this baseball program in terms of wins and losses when you look at what they're about to lose in the field.
Trying to figure out exactly how this baseball season has gotten to where it's gotten to, at 20-17 for the Gamecocks. And even in last night's game, I think a pretty good maybe representation of the season. The Gamecocks were about a foot away from not even tying the game up at 3. It was a 2 RBI triple, I believe, from it happened in the 3rd inning, I think it was, and it was a foot fair. It was basically fighting off a 2-strike pitch and trying to go the other way. And after the ball game, LT Tolbert admitted, he was like, I think the wind kept it fair from going foul down the left field line. It ended up being a triple, and Tolbert ends up coming in on an RBI hit from Jacob Olson off the third baseman from Presbyterian there. That tied the game up at 3, and I thought the Gamecocks might go on to win the ball game against Presbyterian, clearly a team that doesn't have the type of resources and talent that the Gamecocks do, and instead it went the other way, 7-4 the final score. You mentioned improvement and where the freshmen are right now and moving forward from a pitching staff standpoint. Albert hit us up on the Shepherd's Glass inbox, says haven't seen any improvement from the new regime, the coaching staff he's talking about, and all we ask for is improvement this season. This has to get cleaned up quick in whatever fashion. And
I wonder, again, we've talked about with Brian and Trey and just the competitive spirit, and that's not saying that these kids go out there not caring whether they win or they lose. And I'll give you an example. I don't know where this falls as a parenting question. So, little vacation. Yesterday I had the 5-year-old Austin, and we play basketball. We play a little bit of basketball back and forth. He's got a dunk to win the game. At the very end, we're going back and forth. He's got a dunk to win the game. He doesn't take it, apparently because he wants to play more and go to overtime. I'm not sure. So I kind of grab the ball, and I shoot a 3 and make it, win. And then I don't know if you do this to your kids. I ran around the room celebrating and in your face. And he got upset. He was very, very upset. The 5-year-old Austin, my son, was very, very upset. Both of my kids, Ansley and Austin, are very competitive. I'm a very competitive person deep down when I'm not eating donuts or drinking coffee or working on a sunburn. But I'm very, very competitive. And we've done this a little bit with Trey and Brian, and I've seen both of them say it, and then I've seen people tweet at me, and that I don't want to say the stupid moniker, but you'll see people use it, the participation era, where everybody gets a trophy. You're in a 3-3 game last night. You should be the better team. You got to step on the neck of the opponent and knock them out. Just knock them out. And I kind of used that line yesterday, watching my son get visibly upset, go to his room, and then it's a teaching moment of like, okay, it's good to be angry that you lost. And you look at this baseball team. Are they getting how are they responding in the dugout to losing? Because most fans who have no real say in it they get upset. They call the radio programs, they go on the message boards, they go wherever, and they get upset that their team is losing to inferior opponents. Is the baseball team taking it the same way? Is there that drive to win? And I kind of relate it back to being a parent now and watching my kids grow up. And again, I've got a daughter who's in gymnastics, and she's very competitive. The 5-year-old, my son Austin, is very, very competitive. and how that carries through in life. And then you translate it into big boy college athletics today and the drive to win and whether it's there or not. And again, I'm not saying that South Carolina's baseball players show up at the ballpark and are happy that they're on scholarship and happy that they're playing a big program and wins and losses are irrelevant. But I think most people out there would wonder right now, is that the biggest problem with this team? Is the competitive fire, the want to just go out and when things are at their toughest or when you're tied 3-3 to make the play, make the things happen and go out and win the ball game?
Well, I think the problem with that is that you equate then adding more intensity to positive results. And I think in baseball particularly, I think it can go the other way. And I think we might be seeing that with this year's team. Mark Kingston after the game mentioning he thinks that his team's swings are a little long, the bats are a little slow. I equate that to, hey, I'm trying to hit a home run here. I want to make sure that I'm going to do it as opposed to just trying to find a way on base and trusting your teammates and making sure that you're staying within yourself. I think we saw it in the Justin Smoke, Steve Pierce era where guys put a ton of pressure on themselves and it didn't result in College World Series teams a lot of times. I mean, there were 3 big leaguers in the starting lineup last night when Toronto played Kansas City from former Gamecocks, Whit Merrifield, Pierce, and Smoke. So clearly those teams had talent when you're talking about a team that Justin Smoke led with 2 other guys who got drafted very high back in the day off of that same team in James Darnell and at shortstop Reese Havens. But that didn't equate to the best Carolina teams. So I think the best ones we've seen, and we talk about it all the time, had those guys who were very intense and also had some guys who could also just give them the old shot in the ribs in the dugout, maybe like, hey, man, lighten up. Well, it's going to be okay.
And that's what Dyson's basically, Brian has admitted. Brian, if you get picked, I don't know if people can pick that up from listening on the radio, but Brian, Jeff Coates more of the very serious, very
analytical, intense.
Whereas Dyson's more the guy you would look over and he's got as much gum in his mouth as possible. And he's got 6 pairs of shades on and he's doing some kind of funky dance. And Trey Dyson's almost admitted to the point that his job, his role on that team was to keep everybody loose, almost to the point that he would do something in the dugout that Ray Tanner would have to calm him down.
Not almost. Definitely to that point. Stop doing that. And that's the thing with this year's team that other Carolina teams have not had to deal with. They now have the burden of what happened last year. They didn't play well enough for their coach to stay on.
Right.
They know that, right? And now you have a new coach coming in, and you're having similar type struggles. I think that's only added to kind of the burden that this team is carrying, and that's a tough one to carry, man, in baseball when you are trying everything. And it's such a mental game as well. You take extra reps and the whole thing, and just because you try harder doesn't mean that you get better results. It's just 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2 in this thing. I think that's part of the issue. Ray heard Mark Kingston talking about that and wants to weigh in on the Love Chevrolet phone lines at 803-404-6100. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning. How y'all doing today?
All right, you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. I've noticed a couple of things about our pitching staff. Probably the most noticeable is the fact that instead of trying to get ahead with the first pitch, they want to nibble immediately and expand the strike zone. And you can't do it. If you're trying to throw off the plate and get a call, unless you're pinpoint control and you've been there, an umpire's not going to give it to you.
No, Ray.
And a hitter's not going to swing at it.
I hear you, Ray, but you're not trying to convince me that that's the philosophy of the pitching staff is to not throw a strike.
No, I'm not. I'm telling you, the freshman pitchers that we've got out there have a tendency to, instead of trusting their stuff and throwing a first pitch strike, pitching backward in the count sometimes, instead of that, they are immediately starting on the corner, and they can't do it.
Yep, I hear what you're saying exactly.
Before they can make a man swing.
And you're thinking then that it's a kind of a confidence issue? Is that where you're going with that?
I think part of it's confidence. I think part of it is just not an uncertainty, really, in whether or not they have the ability to get the guy out.
I hear what you're saying, Ray. I think that's a large part of learning how to pitch in college baseball, and also a part of the frustration that the coaching staff sees as well. I mean, Mark Kingston is very clear from the first time he talked. He despises his pitchers' walking guys, like every baseball coach at every level almost. The stuff isn't the issue with these guys, and that's why I take exception when people want to say that this team isn't talented enough. The velocities are up there, man. You go through college baseball, you go through Gamecock baseball through the decades, and this staff might have some of the best velocity that you've seen from a pitching staff. It's a matter of being consistent and throwing pitches. You mentioned it, Ray. Working ahead in counts is almost the entire pitching. That's almost the whole thing. If you're ahead and you can dictate how things go, then you're going to have success most of the time, and that's been an issue for this year's staff. There's no doubt about it, and last year, part of the deal. When walks weren't the issue last night for Gamecock pitching, only 4 walks, I think, on the game, getting ahead and dictating things and making hitters uncomfortable, part of the issue, no doubt. Thanks for the phone call, Ray. Let's move on the Love Chevrolet phone lines. Mike is up next talking about Carolina baseball. Good morning, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to point out last night, looking in the dugout, watching the team, we had players that were just standing there carrying on conversation about who knows what. Nobody was paying attention. We had players in the dugout that didn't even know we were playing a baseball game, apparently. I mean, nobody's up on the rail. Nobody's watching the game. They're just standing there talking, carrying on conversations like they're standing in study hall or something. It's really sad that we don't have a Jim Tolman or Morales that we had there that can keep people focused and in the game. And I think that's a lot of it. Our players aren't, for whatever reason, this once proud program has fallen to nobody cares. And to hear the coach come on and blast the pitching staff last night when you've gone 22 innings without scoring a run, going back to the 3rd inning of the first Arkansas game, then, you know, and you mentioned something earlier about the way we were hitting the ball, like everybody was trying to hit home runs and stuff. Well, that was his philosophy coming in, was to change it to hit the long ball, and that's what I think we're doing. They made the point this weekend that almost every ball we hit was a fly ball. Mike Morgan talked about it. That everything we hit was a fly ball. We didn't hardly hit anything on the ground anymore. And I think that's been the philosophy that's been changed in our hitting approach. And that's why you're seeing us pop up and fly out so much. We're not trying to get that base hit or advance a runner or whatever. I just think it's a deep, deep problem, and it started 2 or 3 years ago before this coach even got here. And I think Ray waited too long to make the change. And it's going to take 2 or 3 years to get it back to where it was. And you know, Kingston did a good job moving Madison to first base. A lot of people, including me, have said that Madison wasn't our best shortstop. He should have been playing somewhere else or DHing. And he finally made that move, and that's paid off a little bit up the middle on defense. So he's doing some things to try to make it better. But, you know, look at what we got. You don't see no Kevin Marzillis and no Jackie Bradleys and no them kind of kids out there playing right now. We just don't have the talent that we had 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. That's it.
Thank you, Mike. To me, it's an oversimplification to say you look in the dugout and guys are carrying on conversations. I don't know what you want to see. Do you want to see the softball cheers over there or the everybody wearing a rally hat kind of thing? I don't think it's a lack of caring or a lack of trying hard. And I think on the flip side of that, I think it can be too much. It's guys trying to do too much at the plate. When balls are going out of the ballpark, you say, like when it's 15-1 against Kentucky, right. Is it a hitting philosophy issue? When you beat Florida 15-7, is it not coaching well? I think it's a lack of results, and then we try to blame it on the coaches from that standpoint. Now, there is some responsibility there, but what you can't say about this coaching staff is that they haven't tried to make adjustments. I think out of the 30-some games, they've had 30 different lineups out there. I think they're doing all that they can from that standpoint, but clearly from a production standpoint, it's just not getting done, Bill.
You know, I think that to me is what is driving people the probably the craziest when you talk about this baseball team or confusing people there are times that everything comes together and clicks for this baseball team. And then there are times like last night. So you can say, well, it's the hitting philosophy. The hitting philosophy is not working. But then you see 15 runs against Florida and 15 runs against Kentucky, and you see some offensive output. And then you see them completely go in the tank like they did against North Carolina for a little while, or like they have for the last couple games. You see at times when pitching seems to be stellar. Obviously, the inexperience at pitching, I think people are a little bit more willing to forgive at this point in time. But it does seem like anytime you try to pinpoint what exactly it is, and I feel like we do that, our program, you and I, we sit here and kind of talk about it. We've done a lot this morning. Go, well, talent, I don't know. Coaching, I don't know. Is it lack of wanting to? I don't know. Is it they're not good? It is one of those things. I go back to your poll question. I wasn't here. I don't know how exactly the conversation went on Monday. I guess I did see the poll question pop up on Twitter and saw the results. But to say it's confusing is probably an understatement, given that it seems like any little thing that we want to pinpoint and say, well, that's the problem. It seems like the next game, that's not the problem. That's rectified and the problem's a new area. A new leak has sprung, and now you're trying to figure out how to plug that one and get something else solved.
Another thing I disagree with on Mike there, I didn't hear Mark Kingston blast his pitching staff. I just heard him say that giving up 7 runs against Presbyterian is not good enough. And anybody who would disagree with that, it makes me shake my head. I think he's done a good job, Mark Kingston particularly, in not blasting his players when I would think his frustration level is off the charts right now. And it would be very easy to come out and air some of that frustration and feel and get the feeling from the outside that he is throwing his players under the bus and almost create a divide saying, these weren't my guys. I can't help what I'm seeing out there. This is a problem that happened before me, and I can't wait to move on and get my guys in here. I think that would be the easy mistake to make, and we're not hearing that from Mark Kingston.
No, and there's something what I like from Kingston is just the simple fact that there's a little bit of Steve Spurrier in there where you just come out and it's complete honesty and go, this shouldn't happen. We know, what he doesn't need to offer an apology. He doesn't need to go, we're sorry. We know, but him coming out last night going, this is unacceptable. I mean, this is not, and he, unfortunately, that line doesn't work more than 1 year, I think, because we've heard it a lot this year. But I think if you're a fan, you at least like him knowing that this isn't going to cut it at South Carolina. What's happening now, and maybe this you get 1 year past, but this, what's happening, won't get you this job, won't keep you this job for very long. And I think if as a fan, maybe you should be at least a little pleased that Mark Kingston does seem like the guy who grasps that very, very quickly and is not afraid to come out in a press conference and say it, and is also a guy who appears to be fully involved in trying to change it.
Bill's got some advice maybe on how things can get better for this year's team. But go ahead, Bill.
Hey, good morning. Idea for your Frank's discount tire poll question either today or tomorrow be, is it yes or no, is it time to throw the bats in the shower? Thank you. Have a great day.
Done. Thank you, Bill. Checks in the mail for producing today's program.
Excellent work.